What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blerd Kingdom podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be speaking about something that I believe is seldom spoken about. And the reason why is because many people are afraid to delve into this topic at the risk of looking hypocritical or being questioned about their belief, or just the general idea that someone could kind of break down and psychoanalyze what they're saying. But that is not me. Today, I want to talk about the balance between being pro-black and enjoying non-black things. I also want to go into a little bit of detail about staying sane and when does enjoying these non-black things become off-code. Before we get into the real gist of the topic, I want to give y'all a very direct yet basic definition of what pro-black actually means. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. I may have broken it down a bit in some earlier podcast episodes that I've done. But pro-black means black first and making sure that the needs of black people are properly met as a priority. Anything that goes against the criteria that I just stated is not pro-black. Now, some people, especially in the conscious community, have some reserves about the term. And I can kind of understand to a certain extent where they're coming from. A lot of their beliefs are that people slap the pro-black label onto their name and then go around and start caping for other quote-unquote marginalized groups equal to or even harder than they do blackness. And some of these things may include LGBT, so-called people of color, women, etc. Again, I get where the conscious community or those who disagree with using the term pro-black are coming from, because that perspective on pro-blackness makes it seem like there's a contradiction, because you now are equating or adding more value on matters that are not about black empowerment, but then calling yourself pro-black. And that is a common practice. And I'm going to admit, I've seen that happen quite a bit as well, too. So I was following this Instagram page, and it's pretty popular. And they were surveying some people and asking a bunch of different questions that related to the idea of pro-blackness. So I'll give you a few that I saw in this survey. 1, can you be pro-black and sleep white? 2, is it okay to have black leaders fighting for black liberation and have white partners? And 3, can biracial people be pro-black? Now, there were a couple more questions outside of the ones that I just listed, but these were the big ones that got a lot of attention. Now, I kind of want to give you my take on what I think about it and break it down a little bit so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. If you look at the track record, it doesn't look very good when it comes down to letting some of those things fly. We're talking about in regard to the questions that I just listed. I personally don't mind a mixed black person being a black leader as long as they have a black spouse and are on code. But the other two is where you begin to lose me, if I'm being very honest. Now, some people don't really rock with the idea of mixed black people being black leaders, but I think that there has to be a certain code that goes with it personally, although I think a lot of people are just not really feeling it all together. So here's my example of the other two questions and why I don't rock with them. People like Kamala Harris, whatever the hell her name is, who really gives a shit. People like Kamala Harris are a strong example, especially of the whole trusting a black leader, being for black liberation, and having a white spouse, and it being a total fail. I mean, she literally went out of her way to say she ain't about to do nothing for black people specifically. Think about her past too, and everything that she's done with that. Really, she's been using her blackness as a gimmick to get votes. That and swaying gullible black women. Not to say all black women are gullible, of course, because that's certainly not true. but she wants to sway them over just because she was an AKA when it came time to voting in the presidential election. She then even doubled back later and said, you voted for us, so you can't be mad at what you get. I think she literally said that in one of the very recent speeches that they did. In a way that basically says, in your face, if you were mad that I haven't done anything for black people for real, then that's on you. And unfortunately, I'm not going to lie to y'all, that is the only thing that she has said that I actually agree with. Because it is on y'all. Y'all knew that she had this record that showed a lot of anti-blackness, yet y'all still were championing it for her and big upping her because of the look. So in other words, the fact that she is a mixed black woman and she is an AKA. There are a couple other things there too, but I'm just giving you all a couple examples of what I mean. This is what happens when you get someone who claims blackness when it's convenient, then becomes a poster child for women empowerment and Asians selectively. Anyway, though, enough about Kamala. I was just trying to make my point about pro-blackness and how we have to get out of bending and twisting the definition and who we can allow ourselves to listen to and be led by. But I will get into trusting off-code Negroes in another episode and how I feel about all that. Now I want to talk to you all a little bit about my personal journey to pro-blackness. See, I need to tell you all a little bit of a story. And some won't admit this, but I will. I have not always been pro-black. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. The truth is that was not my fault. When you are a child, you are led, taught, and guided by those who raise you, whether that be your parents, like your biological parents or someone else, and then the experiences you have from the environments that you are in. As you grow and you mature, you make more and more conscious decisions and start finding your path. I even have this belief that to some extent, some of us may end up being 5 different people in our lifetimes, and that is certainly me. I never really had a good and stable male role model in my life, so it was up to me at a certain point to find out what that looks like and even establishing my belief systems that I wanted to take on. I grew up and had quite a bit of bad experiences with racism in high school, in college, and definitely in the workplace. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be totally honest with y'all. I have dealt with some type of racial BS at almost every job that I've ever had. Some of these experiences, a lot of people close to me don't even really know about, I'll even say. What I started to see is a real life portrayal of what having vitriol for just existing as a black man would look like when you follow all of the rules. And what I hated about that experience was I did everything as was told and as I was brought up to do. I went to prestigious schools and followed all the rules, and even some things I look back and I cringe on how adamantly I followed them and how I dealt with them. And it even saved me, and it never saved me from being a victim of anti-black racism. What that told me was that I needed to abandon those beliefs and things that occurred in my life that didn't serve me or shield me from this happening. I was misguided, but luckily I had the tenacity to start understanding the why and begin following my path. One day, I may write a book on all of this, but I just wanted to give you all a little bit of an insight into my life and a little bit of honesty about who I am and who I was. The truth is, like many other people, I'm still learning on this journey I am now devoted to. What I will say, though, is growing up, I would see and hear things about black history and my people and other black civil rights quote-unquote causes people were motivated by that were Afrocentric, and something about the way certain things were told to me just never really sat right with me, but I didn't know how to articulate that feeling or why I felt that feeling. Later, I learned that it's because the full picture of our history wasn't being told to me. And something about coming in somewhere in the middle, being indoctrinated and not having a good guide to understand that just didn't really sit right with me. Even in dating back then, I was willing to consider women of any race, but I always found myself into black women and having a difficult time 100% investing into relationships with women who were not black. In the back of my mind, I knew my wife was going to be black, even if I couldn't prove why. And looking back now, it all makes a lot of sense now. I mean, my wife is black, and on top of that too, it's something that I constantly look back on and I say, I remember when I was in high school, and I remember even having a conversation with one of my friends about it, and I said, you know, I have a feeling that my wife is going to be black. I don't know why, but it's just like I don't want to say an inkling, but it's just a gut feeling that that's what's going to end up happening. And it all just, like I said, just kind of makes sense. Now I want to talk to you all a little bit about things that I enjoy as a pro-black man that are non-black. To be honest, I don't really think there's anything wrong with enjoying non-black things as a pro-black person. If anything, I would encourage it because it makes you versatile, it makes you knowledgeable, and it helps you learn things that you can gain experience on. It also might be pretty difficult to 100% dodge everything, be it business, be it entertainment, be it food, etc., that is non-black. And what you don't want to do is live your life either in hypocrisy or worrying if you are experiencing accidental hypocrisy. I think it's all about balance as well too. Knowing what resonates with you and your values in pro-blackness and what violates those boundaries that you've created with your values. One thing I will say to this, y'all, is that when it comes to that balance, you have to consider a few things. First of all, what are you being pro-black for? I'm going to break that down a bit for you too. Part of being pro-black means staying on code in blackness. So with that, we need to define what on code means and what you're on code for. For me, I'm on code for creating black autonomy. In America, that means putting wealth into black pockets that's owed to them. And this is what I mean by black pockets. I mean black people who are from here and in America. And then some going and doing my due diligence to create autonomy, which in a way creates a freedom to choose. At this point, the possibilities are endless. I bring all this up because that has to be my mindset and thought process while I'm enjoying these things that aren't black-centric per se. I need to think about that even when it comes to communicating with others, be they a highly knowledgeable black in the ideal of pro-blackness or a non-black person. It's almost as if I filter things through a certain lens. I have to remember these values because I don't want to get stuck in a rut of enjoying these things so much and only concentrating on them so much that they become or begin to manifest in my focus and I forget what my purpose is. I also need to think about the idea that enjoying things that are not pro-black is about maintaining your sanity more than it is about living in a world where you don't adopt the motto where you feel like as long as you are surrounding yourself with nothing but happiness that you can ignore anti-black racism in a way. I know that's part of me. Too often, a lot of us and some of these old niggas, baby boomers, and the generation before them are a great example. They adopt this mindset that we can't do anything about it and we might as well enjoy what we can while we are still here. They seek peace by conforming and forgetting that value. What people like that don't realize is without connection to your culture and the will to stand up and fight, to not be disrespected for just being who you are, it's difficult to have an overall respect for that person because their values are either rooted in upholding white supremacy or in just straight up being a coward and facing it. Now I want to talk to you all about staying sane. As far as staying sane goes and enjoying things that are non-black, you have to understand, I'm a blerd. So, of course, that title can make me interested in so many different nerdy endeavors. For example, I love watching superhero shows and movies. But that's not the only thing that I enjoy outside of nerdy things. I like to dance. I'm a big wrestling fan. I love to cook and I love to try different foods of all different cultures. I love listening to all different types of music. I like anime to some extent. I like reading fantasy books. I like watching interesting television shows. I like playing video games. The list goes on and on. Being pro-black is just simply a value and not a state of imprisonment. But another thing I need y'all to realize is most of the good cultural things that we enjoy here in America were originated by the efforts of black people and were stolen. So when we think about the idea of something being off limits to a pro-black person, we need to consider that we have our cultural stamp in it. Black people have got to realize in all this struggle and strife, we have got to stay sane. Mind you, our people have the innate ability to be resilient, but we have to mix in some fun things to keep us from not being able to be present in our beliefs. I think in some video that he did some years ago, David Banner, I don't know if you guys follow him or look at his content, but he kind of talked about what I'm talking about to a certain extent in his own way. He talked about how he was conscious now and how people believe because he's conscious that there are certain things that he doesn't do. But he said, I still live a normal life to a certain extent because he's still out here smoking weed and doing all this other stuff that he enjoys doing. He talked about how he is still himself, but he has fully embraced his conscious values and has been able to find the balance in that. Now, obviously, some parts of his lifestyle changed. Like, for example, I think he did a lot of meditating now, and he also gave up meat, if I'm not mistaken, but that kind of came with the territory for him. Anyway, I'm just exemplifying where others have similar thought processes about this topic and just giving my thoughts on all of it. The next thing I want to talk to you all about is putting boundaries up when you're pro-black, because that's extremely important. So I want you all to listen to me very carefully when I detail these things. There are certain things, given my pro-black values, that I do not do or acknowledge differently, or I acknowledge differently. For example, over time, I have shied away from certain holidays. Admittedly, I will go to a family's on a holiday, like for example, Christmas, because I don't really get to see them. But I don't get really big into doing the most with the gift giving. I could go into the weirdness associated with practically every American holiday and how it is either tainted and twisted or downright evil in nature, but I'll save that for another time in another video. Now, I appreciate birthdays. I'm not going to lie to y'all, because I celebrate having another year of life and making that special day my own, and I do acknowledge that Juneteenth is a thing because we have to have some culture. But also, I recognize that it is not something that I'm talking about Juneteenth here, that is a true black originated holiday, because it really was given to us. My wife and I love to create our own traditions as well too. And that's really important to do in all families going forward with the way that Western society has stripped us of our culture. But honestly, when it comes to shit like Easter and St. Patrick's Day and so-called Independence Day and shit like that, I don't indulge whatsoever. And I want to back up and go back to the birthday thing for a second. One thing I hear a lot from y'all, I hear from all types of people, not just black, but I'm just speaking to black people here in this case. One thing that I hear a lot from y'all is, well, the birthday is just another day. It's just another day. Now, I don't try to tell people how to live their lives. I really don't. But I want black people to just kind of somewhat shy away from that. Like, just get out of that, because you got to understand how important your existence is. And that's the mindset I put myself into when it comes to my birthdays. I'm like, I'm an important ass person. This is the day that I came into fruition on this earth. There's no reason why I shouldn't celebrate that. There's no reason why I shouldn't make it special for me. There's no reason why I shouldn't do something for myself that celebrates the greatness that is me. I wish a lot of black people would have that type of mindset, and I'm going to challenge y'all to start adopting that type of mindset instead of this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, passive whatever, I'm just kind of going with the flow type of mindset. You need to think of yourselves as a very special being, because you're a very special being on this earth. So when your birthday comes, maybe you don't have to even do it on your birthday, but when your birthday comes or some other way that you want to celebrate it, you should make it a priority to find a way to celebrate yourself, even if that means giving a day where you do something that is self-care or something for you that shows that you're saying to yourself, hey, I deserve this because of just my presence alone. I just want to say that because I see a lot of people, they get into the whole just another day, you know, blah, 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 and they get into all that. And like I said, everybody has their own thing. I get it. But y'all need to find something where you're like trying to find a day to celebrate yourself and the greatness of your existence. That is all I'm trying to say. I also have a fundamental understanding, and this is my second point when it comes to pro-blackness. I also have a fundamental understanding that white people are not meant to be our leaders, teachers, mentors, parents, etc. You can soak game up from them to take and use it for your benefit, but you're not supposed to idolize them and see them as practical leaders. If you think about it, they have never systematically, I was trying to say it correctly, systematically done anything that has changed and or made restitution for what has happened to black folks in this nation. And because of that, I hold whites in positions of power in high suspicion, and rightfully so. Hell, a lot of y'all who go on and on about Jane Elliott don't realize that even she too has some values that are harmful to black people, and that was proven when this guy I know who has this podcast called the Socks and Sandals Podcast, shout out to him, I believe his name is Emmanuel, shout out to Emmanuel, had her on as a guest. So she was up there telling this brother how Native Americans deserve reparations more than anyone else. So in other words, like, before you can give blacks reparations or think about it, you got to give it to Native Americans. And when he kept bringing up the importance of black reparations, she was over talking him and telling him white people shouldn't try to worry about the way they give reparations to us, but more so they have to think about what they have to do moving forward. And that's your so-called, and to me, like, that's just your so-called white savior right there in the flesh. That's how black people really see her. They see her as a white savior. You have to realize that white leaders don't have the best interest of black folks overall. And you need to use critical thinking and judgment to understand what agenda they may or may not be trying to have come your way when it comes to us as a people. And Jane Elliott is included in that. The third thing I want to talk about is I don't agree with off-code things or big upping harmful people to our community at the sake of saving face with people. I don't allow people to take me back also to a time when I wasn't pro-black or psychoanalyze all of my choices. So if I'm talking to an asshole or a moron that's stuck in their ways, I stay silent and I observe their stupidity if I'm forced. But I correct it if it's someone I respect and care about. But I never agree to something I don't rock with that violates those values, because that would be called being phony and fake. I also don't allow others to laugh at me or ridicule me or my beliefs, even if they think I am reaching, being irrational, or just not taking me seriously in general. I stand firm on my beliefs, and I don't allow people to play with me in that regard. Sometimes an example of that is being mindful of the conversations that you have with white people. In other words, telling them your moves, political conversations, since we really live in two different worlds, and going out of your way to quote unquote teach them to be better. So my third point is basically stating a lot of things that are kind of the basics. So just looking at some of the things that you generally should just off rip know not to do as a pro-black person. It's kind of sounded like I threw a lot of different points at you, but the reason why is because all those things are so general, and those are things that you should just really think about when you have these types of views. When you are pro-black, you have to embrace and accept that a lot of people won't resonate with the things that you believe or the things that you've got to say. You have to be okay with losing friends and family members and people who don't want to associate with you because they strongly disagree with your opinions and the things that you know. Those are things that I obviously could break up into smaller things, but that's just the gist of what I would consider when I'm thinking about pro-black boundaries. The last thing I want to talk to you all about today is, when do all of these things about being pro-black, when does it become off code? What's the fine line between being pro-black and being off code, and the misconceptions behind it? You become off code when you choose to violate your beliefs and your integrity. A lot of times people like to use the phrase that black people are not a monolith. And it's very true, don't get me wrong, it is a very true statement, but I also think that it's a bit overrated in some ways. We are all different, with different mindsets, different upbringings, and even cultures to a certain extent. But sometimes that gets used as a crutch for black people to do whatever they want. You should not be bragging about being monolithic or a monolithic person when you marry an alt-right conservative white man, then turn around and call people who are pro-black or conscious hoteps as if to isolate them from the so-called monolith. That's hypocritical. Those are the type of things that I find to be off code, and also things that show the hypocrisy of that statement itself. So those are things that I would challenge, if you are one of those people who do that, to kind of think about. Think about the idea that you contradict the idea of being pro-black when you do things that are totally opposite of that. You shouldn't be so quick to big up non-black persons, celebrities, actors, and so-called innovators before remembering to celebrate black leaders who have made great contributions. And when I say great contributions, I mean like literally made genuine movements to black empowerment. I also want to include this ideal too. You also need to think about black people from that scale as well too. So not even just non-black persons, but black people who have these off-code mindsets, and you decide to big up them just because they are black. That can become off code to a certain point too, because what it shows to a certain extent is a similarity in mindset. And that's another thing that you want to be very, very mindful of. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean by big up in a non-black celebrity and then forgetting about your very important black leaders. Everyone went mad and talked about Betty White's death. And don't get me wrong, it was very sad. It was. And it's okay to talk about Betty White. It really is. Or any other non-black celebrity if you really like what they did. But I realized that around that time, Frances Cress Welsing, she died not that far away from then, and it was about 5 years ago, and nobody said on the day of her death at all, like, celebrating Frances Cress Welsing for the contribution she's done to as a black leader and the importance of what she's done or anything like that. But y'all talked about Betty White. I'm not even kidding you, for like a week or 2 weeks. Like, it was, I don't know what was talked about longer, the Betty White thing or this Will Smith slap shit. I really don't. So I guess I just say that to say these are some of the things that you should think about and look at. That's just one example, but I could give you very many. I just didn't want to overload you with things. Listen, y'all, all I'm trying to say to you is you can live a normal life, quote unquote normal life, and be pro-black. You just have to be very careful about who you trust, the things that you choose to participate in, and whether or not your actions are re-perpetuating anti-blackness while trying to uphold the pro-black label for yourself. So that concludes this episode of the balance between being pro-black and enjoying non-black things. I appreciate each and every one of you all who has listened to this podcast episode and has tuned in to hear my perspective on this topic. I will have a lot more topics to come other than this, so I want you all to continue to stay tuned. If you all have a podcast yourself, remember to favor this. If you don't, remember to share this and let everybody know, hey, my dude Cool Colas, he's got a dope podcast. Y'all should listen to it. It's informative. He talks about important topics. I enjoy it. The conversation is good. It's helpful. And the energy is good. And let them know that I got a lot to say. Anyway, y'all, I'm going to get going. I just wanted to make sure that I put this out for y'all to hear and for y'all to enjoy. I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's Friday. And I will be talking to y'all soon. Peace.